Good evening and welcome to the National Conspirator. Tonight we have a very special treat for you. It is a long, old, musically delightful conspiracy about the Beatles, about how Paul is dead. And as you might know, he seems to be one of the only remaining Beatles, but I don't know that I buy that story at all. And we've got a very special guest who's gonna help us guide us through this. And I'm also joined by Cecil, as always. Cecil C. Collins.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for having me, Leonard. It's an honor to be here and to talk about this. As someone who was the exact same age and the same sign as Paul, I've been very curious about this conspiracy for a very, very long time, and I have seen some of the physical attribute changes that people have talked about. So I'm very excited to dig in.
Oh, great. And we're joined by Freddie Pilate, world-renowned historian on the Beatles. Freddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Leonard and Cecil. I'm flattered by this opportunity to be able to help the world better understand how, more likely than not, and certainly in my opinion, that Ringo is the last remaining Beatle.
Yeah, yes, indeed. He was the oldest, and now he still is the oldest.
Works out like that sometimes.
Yes, it's very ironic that Ringo would be king of the hill in this situation, but life
Yeah.
is not. Life is very cruel.
Right.
Yeah, and of course with George being the youngest but the heaviest smoker.
Yeah, those two together, they tend to not a good combination. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But Ringo had the biggest nose, and I think maybe he got more oxygen overall. That's just my personal theory. That
that's our general view on the subject, but we have had trouble collaborating with the right medical professionals to help us elaborate what we believe to be the case.
Well, son, we are here to corroborate your story, and I'm very excited about your research into this because I know it's very extensive. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell us all a little bit about your background, son.
Well, I became quite obsessed with the Beatles at an early age, and I've always been one to question what's been put in front of me. And I spent a extensive amount of time in my youth researching this topic on the internet, and I ended up going to a undisclosed online university in alternative history. And ever since then, it has been my passion project to try to convey to the public again what's really going on with this imposter that we have selling out stadiums.
yeah, it's kind of despicable.
It's
yeah.
infuriating.
The
Leonard.
fact that there's that much ability to control the people and thought is got to be the most haunting part about it. It's not even that the man has been reborn 3 or 4 times, or I don't even know. We're going to get into the story. I'm very excited, but I just mean it's just a simple twist of irony. I might sound a little jaded this week. Me and Alicia, we've been having some problems, but it's tough, with the
I'm sorry, Cecil.
with the lockdown and everything.
Yeah.
I try not to
I
get too
haven't-
violent.
I haven't been with anyone since delving into this as deep as I have, because most people aren't willing to listen to me talk about it at length, for like
Yeah.
a couple days.
Yeah, and that must be tough because you have been studying this pretty much your whole life for the past 20 or 30 years at least. And
Absolutely.
well, without much further ado, I think maybe the best way to structure this hour is to for you to kind of indulge us in what the theory is, what the story is, and And
Take
then,
us on a journey, Freddie. We want to
yeah.
go.
Yeah,
All
and,
right,
and
well-
I'm told that you have some sound samples that you're gonna play live for us. Later on, we are gonna take some callers to engage in this subject, but the floor is yours, Freddie, if you're ready.
I do appreciate that. And once again, Leonard, I've definitely heard that joke before, and I'm very serious about this.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yes, you can call me Fred if you think it would deter you from being so humorous in light of such a horrendous government. A lot of people don't know government conspiracy.
Understood. Well, ready, Fred?
That's better, thank you. Well, I do have a couple sound samples that I'll be playing. Some of those are actually including live backmasking of actual Beatles records, some of them original pressings from the 60s. I want to make it very clear to everyone that there's no editing of these sounds that I'll be playing for you backwards. It's just merely being played backwards, physically in the room. Also, too, we have a myriad of visual clues on some of the album art. Specifically, what I'll talk about today is on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Abbey Road. Obviously, the White Album, not much there.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a
then-
conspiracy in itself, son.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well,
Did they lose the camera or something?
I minored in the White Album, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Right.
Yeah, so it's 1966, and Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr in the studio in the wee hours of the night. They're in an argument, and Paul storms out of the studio and gets in his white Austin Healey and goes on a near furious drive after such a horrendous argument. And at this point, he thinks he's just going to go ahead and head home. No one really knows what was on his mind at the time, but what we do know is that when he was en route, he picked up a hitchhiker. Now, if you're familiar with the song Lovely Rita off of Sgt. Pepper's, this was the hitchhiker. It was Lovely Rita, the meter maid, and he picked her up, and they were driving somewhere in northern England by the studio that they were currently operating out of. I don't believe it was Abbey Road at the time. And they in the words of A Day in the Life, got into a car accident. He blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the light had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared, and they'd seen his face before. Now, whether or not they thought he was from the House of Lords, that's up for debate, but they had definitely seen his face before.
So
yes?
Not to interrupt, but just to clarify. So, Paul McCartney got into a car accident, right?
He did. He got into a car accident.
In his Austin Healey.
Yeah.
In a white Austin Healey. And we'll get back to the specific model of car. And obviously, after this happened, Ringo was at the studio, and he was hoping Paul would come back. He ended up getting the news back that Paul had indeed died in that car accident, and his emotional trauma can be analyzed in the song off of the White Album, Don't Pass Me By, in which Ringo sings himself. I listened to your footsteps coming up the drive. I listened for your footsteps, but they never arrive. I'm sorry that I doubted you. You were in a car crash, and you lost your hair. And now those are actual lyrics
That's
from
pretty-
Don't
that-
Pass Me By.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes. So things actually become a lot more straightforward than you would imagine as we continue to elaborate on this. Now, what happened after that, obviously they all got the news. The British government, at the time, the Beatles were their greatest export. They, in their interests, did not want Paul dying and the Beatles splintering because of that. And so, through much bureaucracy, the Beatles were sworn to secrecy, and John Lennon was given the task of burying the body in strawberry fields.
He did it all by himself?
Well, that's to be debated, but
I'm
apparently
sure he had a little help from his friends.
Yes, it was a very small funeral. We can hear, and I'll play a soundbite real quick, in this quick excerpt from the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, in which you can hear John say, "I buried Paul." If you want to listen real quick.
I buried Paul. Kind of like
Yes.
that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an admission right there. And another fun fact about the burial, now we're getting into an art clue, is the cover of Abbey Road. Now,
Okay, let me pull
what
that
they're
up.
wearing in the cover has great significance to this story, as John Lennon is leading the line.
Mhm.
He is the preacher. He's all in white. Ringo is in black. He is the mortician. He is in charge of preparing the body and doing more operational things. As you can see, George Harrison is in the back, and he is just kind of in jeans. He's in the back. He's the last to leave because he's just a general lowly grave digger. And then we have Paul right here in the middle, the only person not wearing shoes, the only person out of step with the band. He's the only one with a cigarette in hand. And you can even look at the white Volkswagen behind George on the left, and if you read the license plate, it says LMW 28IF, and that's in 66. He would have been 28 if he hadn't when Abbey Road came out. I'm so sorry. When Abbey Road came out, he would have been 28 if he hadn't passed in 66. And the LMW does stand for Linda McCartney Weeps. And so, moving forward in the story there.
Why doesn't he have shoes on? Is it just because they were expensive, or they?
The significance of that is that in some cultures, a lack of footwear is seen as a sign of generally a deceased person, or just deathly vibes that are being put out. Same goes for the Tibetan symbol of the dead, with a open palm above the head, which we'll get to in the Sgt. Pepper's art.
It's also a great way to stick it to the man. You walk in the bank and you got your bare feet on, no hush puppies, and you just stand there and stick your feet up on the desk and ask for a loan. And that's the spirit of the 60s.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To me, the shoeless thing's more of a sign of a hippie than a dead.
Yes.
Maybe a dead hippie.
Well, but as you can see, he's wearing a suit, so
That's
it's a little strange there.
Juxtaposition is what rock and roll is really all about.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think covering up deaths is, Cecil.
It sounds kind of rock and roll. I mean, but do go on.
It's more punk rock. I think
punk
it's more
rock,
Sid
maybe,
and
yeah.
Nancy, But I'm so sorry. Please continue with the presentation. It's very fascinating. I'm enthralled.
It's okay. I don't really enjoy punk rock. I'm more of a smooth jazz kind of guy myself these days, but I will continue on a little bit now.
I love me some Kenny G.
Exactly.
And some walking in Memphis.
Yeah. So, in '66, very coincidentally, there was a international Paul McCartney look-alike contest being held.
Wow.
Now,
Coincidentally, huh?
yes, and this was late in '66, and I'll get back to why we know it was '66 when he died. There was a man named William Shears, and he was a Canadian-born citizen, and he ended up winning the Paul McCartney look-alike contest. And then he was never to be heard from again. Now, if we look at the difference in Paul McCartney's appearance from the release of Revolver to the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, you can see quite a distinct change in Paul's features, specifically being his ears look quite different, as well as his eye color shifting from a deeper brown to more of a lighter brownish green, hazily color. They found William Shears Campbell to be precise, and got him from Canada, and he agreed to be the new Paul McCartney. He went through extensive plastic surgeries and learned bass left-handed and was less involved in the writing process for the next couple of years.
Until I learned the ropes of
Yeah,
being
he had to learn the ropes.
world-renowned rock star.
Yes. Some of Paul's more iconic songs off of Sgt. Pepper's were definitely penned either prior to his death or by the rest of the band, and they had him sing and slapped his name on them more so. Yeah.
He does sound a little bit more Canadian after '66. It's just a little tinge.
Yeah, you can hear it in some of the vocals on, especially in When I'm 64. You can kind of hear that foray, just a little bit there.
Yes, there's a foray into a more. Yes, I imagine it took him a long time, and this is another reason to hate Canada.
Yeah, if we
didn't have enough to hate those dadgum ice chuckers.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm not a fan of Canada myself, for a multitude of reasons, this being included. Their willingness to just extradite one of their own citizens in collaboration with the British government to a group of boys making money when 3 out of the 4 were just torn up about it.
Well, I mean, they did make some pretty good music. I'll give them that. Even if he was dead.
It could have worked out a lot worse, but all in the same.
Yeah.
Now, the way that we know it was in '66. So, like I said, there's the obvious physical differences in Paul's appearance from Revolver to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. We're going to get into some of the album art clues here on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You can already tell that on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, it seems a little bit like a funeral. What's buried underneath the dirt in front of all those faces looking down upon it? Especially, you can see Ringo looking pretty downtrodden, looking at what seems to be a grave setup.
Looks very guilty.
Yeah, and Paul comforting him with his hand on his shoulder because Ringo felt as though that it was his fault. Paul, if you look above his head, remember I mentioned that Tibetan sign of the dead? The open palm above the head? That's right up there. And then he's the only person holding a black instrument. Now, if you look at the yellow flowers that are underneath the red ones, spelling out the Beatles. That is a left-handed guitar shape. You can kind of see the outline of the strings a little bit.
Yeah.
That is a left-handed guitar, and if you trace out the flowers just a bit, you can see a P-A-U-L question mark right there in the yellow flowers. If you look at it closely, the L and the question mark at the end are quite pronounced, but the P-A-U-L, so it's Paul. Who's to say? A couple other things. Shiva the Destroyer is front and center here with her 4 arms. And then over to the right, we have a kind of a doll, sort of a puppet deal, wearing the striped shirt over to the right of the cover, underneath the foliage. On her right thigh, if you look very, very closely, you can see a small white model car that greatly resembles an Austin Healey, and the interior is red if you look very close, red being symbolic of blood, as well as to the doll's left you can see a sort of bloodied looking driving glove. But the most damning thing that I've been meaning to get to about the Sgt. Pepper album art also involves the back and the centerfold. Now, you can see the bass drum here with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band spelled out on the bass drum. If you take a mirror and you hold the mirror up in the middle of Lonely Hearts and you mirror the top with itself and you kind of look into it from an angle, first of all, the most obvious message is the right word. The A in Hearts turns into an arrow that points directly up to Paul, and then the H and the E and the R and the T, or in the S, spell out "he die" with an arrow pointing directly up to him. The lonely denotes.
Not to interrupt you, Fred, but we have a caller. Would you be interested in entertaining a caller now, or
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I would like to get back to how we know exactly why it's 66, and we know it to the date.
Okay. Well, I just lost him. So if that caller wants to call back, they can call back. But
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd love to go ahead and take a caller. I'll try to speed this a little further along here.
Take your time, son. You're doing a fantastic job. This is important
This is your
work.
life's work.
Thank
You haven't engaged in any sexual activity for many years for this work, so you be proud of it, and you.
I appreciate it.
Let
It's
it-
Yes,
been,
you take that incel researcher trophy home, and you know what to do with it.
It's been a miserable life, but it feels worth it to again be able to enlighten people.
Well, that's what we are here to do. It is a sacrifice, but
Yes.
it's for the
So,
best.
The lonely, if you mirror the top with itself, it spells out the number 1, and then the word 1, and then the LY spells out the Roman numeral 9, which is IX. Now, if you've seen the new Star Wars movie, you may be familiar with that Roman numeral. And what that denotes is 11-9 on the 9th of November. 1-1 and then 9 in a Roman numeral. 11th of November, he die. Okay, so now if you turn the album cover over, we're on the back of the album cover now. It's okay if you don't necessarily have this pulled up, but I'll outline it for you. First of all, glaring. Paul McCartney is the only person facing away from the photo. That's very obvious right there. That's an obvious nod to the fact that he's an imposter. But the most damning piece of evidence on the back is, if you're familiar with the song She's Leaving Home. The first lyric is Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins. And we have this photo of Paul facing away. If you look at George Harrison's right hand, he's pointing up directly at that lyric. Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins. I don't think it's a coincidence that November 9th, 1966 was a Wednesday.
I don't think that was a coincidence either. And our listeners know that that is not, that there are no coincidences. That's what we are here to do, is to spread the truth and share the good words with people so that we know what's going on in reality. Now, I have a question. Who do you think is behind all of this symbolism?
I would say the Beatles themselves, because they were sworn to secrecy by the British and possibly mutually Canadian government, and they're very upset about it, and they figured they would pepper in what the truth actually was so that people such as ourselves could become privy to what actually occurred.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Those Canucks corroborating with the old cahooting with the old Britannias. That sounds about right to me. And so they have to tell us what's going on somehow. So they use all these symbolisms in the artwork so they can tell us, but they don't want to say it.
Yeah, it's very intricate.
Imagine what would have happened if they would have said that Paul was dead. It would have been worse than that movie they made where the Beatles never existed. It would have been worse than that. That movie was terrible.
I can agree with that.
Now, do you think that the Canadian or the British government knew that they were peppering in these clues? I mean, this seemed to be a way to communicate to the masses without going through the proper channels.
Well, not until it was too late, because the story of Paul's death was not popularized until Detroit DJ started backmasking lots of music and was finding these strange messages.
Can you define backmasking?
So backmasking is when you play a vinyl record backwards.
Okay.
So that was one of the more consumer accessible ways to play things backwards back then. And I was going to say it didn't come to light until late in 1969, after Abbey Road had already been released and the band was essentially dissolved. So it came to light before it was too late by independent investigations such as what I do, and obviously the government was. I'm not entirely. I only study original copies, so I'm not sure what they may have removed or edited.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. Would you like to hear an example of backmasking? Because I do have a turntable set up right here with an original pressing, unedited.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, let's listen to that.
So what I'm going to do a couple times. This is the ending of a song called "I'm So Tired" off of the White Album. The ending of the song has some gibberish coming out of John Lennon's mouth, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that backwards and forwards and backwards a couple times, and you can make out John saying, when he says it backwards, "Paul is a dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him." Again, Paul is a dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him. Let's take a look real quick.
Okay.
Here we go real quick. Right here. Backwards.
Wow.
Oh,
That's amazing, son.
that's
I
impressive.
feel like I'm being spoken to by a demon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, there
very
you have it right
bizarre.
there.
Wow, I feel like I just took a download. Ooh, wow.
Yeah. I've also got a couple of other backmasks here that are digital, but I do have a couple more that are vinyl. But for example, you have the song All Together Now off of Yellow Submarine. Now, forwards.
All together now, 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 all together now.
Now let's see how that sounds backwards.
Now, find the leg is lost, find the leg is lost, find the leg is lost, find the leg
Can you hear I Buried Paul there as well?
is lost, find the leg is lost, find the
Yeah,
leg is
yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
It's crystal clear.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have
exactly.
terrible hearing, but it's just absolutely as clear as a bell to me.
Yeah.
The first question I have with this backmasking is, how do they sing forwards and backwards all at the same time?
Well, it's obviously probably quite an extensive study into just phonetics in general, and I can only assume is quite a meticulous process.
I see. Also, we have a caller here on the line, Freddie. Let's see, caller, you are on the National Conspirator.
Oh, hey. Oh, hi.
Hi. Well, welcome to the show. Do you have a question about the Beatles?
Unfortunately, I'm
Yeah,
having some trouble hearing our,
you know,
our caller.
He's
I
a
heard a rumor.
he's a little quiet.
that-
Oh, yeah?
Well, you're a little
Let's
quiet
see
on
here.
my end, man.
Well, why don't we both turn each other's up? Let's turn ourselves up with the volume knobs.
I turned
That's
myself
a
up.
conspiracy theory
Caller,
unto
would you like to
itself,
speak for a
man,
moment?
sound,
See if I
but
can hear
I'm
you?
not here to talk about that. If you can hear me, here's something that I heard that you guys might not be hip to, but everyone knows Paul McCartney died in 1966,
I'm
right?
not hearing much, unfortunately.
Well, I can
Well, a lot of people-
translate. Sorry,
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, Freddie.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's okay.
so all of the Beatles died
Because I can hear
before
you and Cecil just fine.
1968.
Okay, say that again, caller. We know he died in '66, but
Yes.
something about 1968. I feel like I'm channeling a dead spirit right now. I mean, it's just a caller.
Yeah, I'm actually the ghost of the second George Harrison. All of the Beatles died before 1968.
So you say all of the Beatles died before 1968? Is what this caller is
Yep.
saying.
Oh, yes?
That's what I'm saying. It's the truth, man. It's the truth.
I'm not
and
entirely
the clues,
sure
The clues are there.
what event
The
they
clues are there.
could be referencing to. I have worked with various scholars online who have brought the
Well, can you hear me?
possibility of
Did I
that
blow
to
your
my
mind?
attention,
Am I blowing everyone's mind?
but
The caller
I-
asks if he blew your mind or not, and it sounds like he did not. Caller, caller, can you hear Freddie on your end of the line?
I can hear you.
Can you hear
I
me,
can't
caller?
hear-
Can you hear me?
No. I don't know who that southern gentleman is. I can't hear.
I can hear the caller,
can't
but
hear
just barely.
them.
Yeah.
I can hear it so faintly.
Yeah.
Can you hear our guest, caller?
I can't hear. I can hear the dulcet tones of your host, and I can hear what I assume is Foghorn Leghorn, and I can hear no one else.
Oh,
Well, I do declare I do not appreciate the slanderous remarks, sir. I'm just trying to get to the truth for people, and I'm starting to think that you called in here just to what do they call troll? Just a troll,
slander and troll.
To muckrake our well-intentioned guest and pretend like you can't hear, so that you can cause a ruckus and stir up some problems here in the studio.
Hitting some buttons on
some
his phone
chaos.
right now.
Slander.
Just making
like...
chaos. This is the way that this misinformation gets out there with these people.
Seems like I should be happy that I can't hear him right now.
I didn't mean any slander. I called you the name of probably one of the three
I do love healthy debate, but
in the world. Okay,
not when it's aggressive.
That's all that is. At the end of the day.
Well, caller, I think that I'm picking up some echo here, and thank you for calling, and please do call again, and hopefully our technical issues will be resolved, in addition to our philosophical ones.
You guys are scared of the truth.
We are not scared of the truth, caller. We are just well-intentioned, sensitive human beings who are open-minded and try to treat people with the human decency. Now, I'm sorry if there was some technical difficulties on our end. We are not lily white here, but that is another topic altogether.
Yeah. So, Freddie, what do you have to say about this idea that they all died before 1970? Is there any evidence to suggest that other Beatles, other than Paul McCartney, had died? Well, I mean, other than when they actually died.
Well, there is some evidence to suggest that John Lennon was predetermined to die. There's some evidence to suggest that a random other member may have died.
Like a fifth member?
Well, one could easily say that William Shears Campbell was the fifth member, so maybe we'd be talking about a sixth member here. But most definitely not all of them. I try to be as historically meritable with my investigations of this manner here, and I wouldn't be able to confidently substantiate that sort of claim.
Well, this is one of the more important topics, so we do appreciate your candor, and we appreciate your integrity as a researcher. That's very important. That's probably why you eat mashed up Cheerios for most of your meals. You know, this is the way that we have chosen.
Small sacrifices.
It gets easier, son. You lose teeth, and you just kind of mash it down. You know, it's all right. It's kind of like soft oatmeals with. I've been using the soy milk lately. Because it lasts longer.
Yeah.
I'm an almond guy.
Oh.
Soy has a little bit of estrogen in it, which I kind of like.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it, too. It calms me down. Like I said, I've been a little bit, on edge with this whole lockdown thing, and, well, I don't want to get violent.
Yeah, I don't want you to get violent either, Cecil. I don't like to see you violent, because
it's not a pretty picture.
He's a for the listeners, he's a foreboding man. I would not want to get between him and any object of his desire.
Or a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
You draw back a nub.
Yeah, and I sympathize with the sandwich, because that's where I draw the line. Once there's a... Yeah, anyway. So maybe how was John predetermined? I mean, other than just being a radical and kind of ruffling some feathers, somebody in maybe the government, you think, had kind of predetermined
exactly.
to sacrifice him?
It's always the government, Leonard, and Mark David Chapman was obviously a fall guy for the entire thing. If not a fall guy, a extremely what would the proper word be, devoted follower of the Illuminati, probably because of John Lennon's anti-government, anti-war behaviors that was not just destabilizing the efforts of the American or British government, but something deeper that we all obviously know is holding the strings.
Maybe he just didn't like people hanging out in bed all day. You know, he's like, get out of bed. Get out of bed, get a job.
He exhibited quite an amount of sloth in his later years, for sure. That is obviously deplorable because, you know, if I just spent all day laying in bed, I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
Yeah, you would get nothing accomplished. You would leave no legacy. Nobody would know your name. And here we are talking to you, Freddie Pilate, and your name is gonna ring loud and clear for many minutes to come.
Oh yes, well, I greatly appreciate it. Again, I'm not seeking any fame or anything of that manner. I am just simply trying to make sure everybody knows the truth, Leonard and Cecil.
We appreciate that. Do you have any other backmasking samples to share with us? I find those very fascinating, and I feel like it speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple other ones here that I can queue up for you. I do also want to note a big detail that I forgot, just a couple real quick to gloss over before a couple more backmaskings, is Billy, as I told you, his replacement's name was William Shears Campbell from Ontario. In the Sgt. Pepper artwork in the centerfold, you can see a patch on the imposter Paul McCartney's arm for the OPP, which is the Ontario Police Precinct. And then, obviously, in the first moments of Sgt. Pepper, after the title track and before Little Help with My Friends, they introduced the one and only Billy Shears. And yeah, so there's that. And then obviously something we've glossed over a little bit is the walrus. Obviously Paul McCartney being labeled the walrus by Paul in Glass Onion. Funnily enough, if I may be able to pull that out in a moment, but if you backmask that track, the walrus was Paul. Backwards also is the walrus was Paul. Surprisingly,
it says the same thing forwards and backwards.
Yes, because he's making it very, very clear that the walrus was Paul, and that is a reference to a character from a Lewis Carroll novel, being the walrus, as y'all might know. I think it's from possibly Alice in Wonderland or one of other of Lewis Carroll's fantastical adventures.
We do have another caller on the line here.
Well, the walrus is an imposter in Lewis Campbell's writings, so that's a reference to that.
I see.
Yeah.
Let's connect this caller. Oh, well, the caller has jumped ship. That's just as well. Maybe they were a walrus, and
absolutely. Well, I definitely would love to speak with someone directly who may have any questions about the matter.
Yes, if anybody knows the whereabouts of this walrus that we're looking for. No, the walrus is
Paul.
Is Paul.
Yeah.
So he's dead.
Yes.
Now, have they ever tried to find his bones? I feel like that would be kind of a cool thing to, just kind of have.
Try to find Paul's bones?
It's like one of his bones.
You can make some guitar picks out of the bones or something cool like that.
Are you talking about attempting to seduce Billy Shears?
Oh, well,
I wouldn't want Billy Shears' bones.
I don't want Billy's bones.
Those are worthless, brittle bones.
Oh, yeah, I want Paul's bones.
Yeah, well, I bet with the amount of stress Billy Shears has been under for his entire career as an imposter, at this point he would probably need some Cialis or something along those lines for his bone
Yeah,
to not be brittle.
that's got to be really that's got to be a lot of stress to be somebody else, somebody who's so famous for so long, and you know it's kind of remarkable that the guy who looked like Paul, he's a pretty darn good musician too. I'll give him that because he's
You know,
I mean, Wings.
Wings
not
was
bad.
fantastic. And if you listen to the bass guitar in there, it's very, very good.
Yeah.
oh yes, yeah, and also as you can tell, Billy Shears probably had bigger hands than Paul did, because he switched to a Rickenbacker from Paul's famous Hofner viola bass around the time that he assumed his identity. And he did have to learn how to play left-handed, but he did already play bass, I believe, and he preferred a larger fretboard, so he switched to that Rickenbacker. And you can see on the Rickenbacker in the music videos for songs such as I Am the Walrus or Strawberry Fields Forever, that the bass guitar, it's white, but it seems to be drenched in kind of this red liquid. I think that kind of what I'm saying speaks for itself as to what that's a representation of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do have a couple more back masks here. You may be familiar a little bit with this a little erratic ending to the entire album of a Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And it's in the middle groove on the end of it, and it just loops endlessly. And that is this. So that loops endlessly when you're done with the record. Now,
Kind of gets annoying after a little bit.
A little bit. It really makes you want to go and turn it off and not keep that record spinning. And that was only included on original UK pressings back in '67. But if you play that backwards, we hear. Will Paul be back as Superman?
Oh, I thought it said single dad, as a single dad. But what's the difference, you know?
Will Paul be back as Superman? They were very uncertain as to whether or not this would work out. Will Paul be back as Superman? They had only just put out a record since replacing him. They weren't sure.
And then he started that band Wings.
He did.
With wings.
With wings.
And you can fly.
Like
Like Superman.
Like yeah.
Yeah, he
And then
did.
he became a knight.
Yeah.
And he is as big as Elton John.
He unfortunately did come back as Superman. I've got a couple more here. We have the track Birthday, the first track off of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. No, sorry, the White Album. In the video for that one, quite an eerie subject is they are all wearing white suits, and John, Paul, and George are all wearing, John, Ringo, and George, not Paul, are all wearing red carnations, while Paul is donning a black carnation. And I'll go ahead here and show you this clip from the song Forwards. Okay, and then backwards, you're going to hear them say, "He's dead, yes, 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 yes. He's dead, we sing hallelujah. They're trying their best to embrace the new Paul." Did you hear that?
Yes.
They say that I didn't hear the part about embracing the new Paul.
He's dead. Yes, 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 yes. That is confirming.
Oh.
And it is a more upbeat song, especially in the video. It's a very large celebration. They're trying their best by the point of the White Album to, again, like I said, and during Sgt. Pepper's, they were a little uncertain, but by the White Album, they were like, okay, maybe this is going to work, and we need to try to embrace Billy Shears as the new Paul. I'll play that backwards one more time. He's dead. Yes, 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 yes. He's dead. We sing hallelujah. And there you have it.
Wow. Yeah, he's dead.
He's definitely dead.
And feel free to let me know if we get another caller, but I do have probably one of the most damning pieces of evidence of Paul's death
That just
to
sounds,
exist.
that sounds juicy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We're going to want to hear that. I'm licking my lips.
It is what John called a sound experiment. What it is the track Revolution 9, which is off of, I'm getting it out of the sleeve here, which is off of the White Album. And I think when you hear some of this backwards on vinyl, it may be a little disturbing. Okay, so give me one moment here.
So that means listeners out there, now if you're easily miffed or scared or afraid of certain things, you might not want to listen to this. This is just a disclaimer.
I would not listen to this in a, let's say, dark room alone.
Yeah. If you're frequently visited by demons, watch out.
Also, if you're at the skating rink, you don't want to listen to this.
Yeah, it's not good skating music.
It's not very good for that. So, Wow, it already sounds very scary.
Yeah.
It sounded like a scream.
All right, here we go. It's playing backwards right now on the turntable. I believe this is the beginning of the final track of the album, and then we're going into Revolution 9 here right now. So that's a crowd of people yelling, "Take him out." Now, did you just hear that? Satan, look at me. What this is essentially is John Legend's interpretation of the horror of what they all went through and the story of the crash.
Wow, and this is all backwards.
This is backwards.
That's incredible.
Yes. You could hear someone earlier saying Paul in a very low-pitched manner.
Yes.
Was that anonymous?
Did you just hear that Paul is dead?
Yes.
That's the crowd of people. You can hear them, the crowd of people outside the accident. Hear that? Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man. You can hear car horns. That's the sound of the crash right there.
Wow.
There's the crash. You just heard their interpretation of what the crash sounded like. You hear some moaning. There's the fire. There's the fire caused in the accident that took Paul's life. More car noises. Get him out. So, I'll go ahead and stop it there. If any listeners are intrigued as to hear the full recording and the continual revelations that the band are giving us through that track, specifically John Lennon's sorrow about it, through that sound experiment, you can definitely, it's Revolution 9 backwards is pretty easy to find. And then I do real quick want to point out one of the more iconic parts of that is the Turn Me On Dead Man that you heard, that is said when you play it backwards. That is in reference to Paul McCartney was supposed to sing all of Day in the Life, and in that song John has to sing some of his parts, and in that song he says, changed the lyrics a little bit, he said, "I'd love to turn you on," and he's singing what Paul would have been singing. And the response on the White Album is "Turn Me On, Dead Man."
Wow.
So there you have that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was...
Son, your research has just been fascinating and so amazing. You know, growing up in the 60s, you know, several things shocked me. One was the inventions of condoms, and the other one was the Paul is dead conspiracy. Now, you have shed some light on some things that I've suspected for a very long time, and I just appreciate all your hard work and your time. Now, is there somewhere that people can find your work and donate to you? Do you have like, I don't know, like a website or something like that?
Yeah. Well, no, I can't afford a website right now, unfortunately. But and all my publications from the online university I went to are tangled up in accreditation disputes. But however, I will tend to pop up time to time on various message boards under the name Captain Pilate, and I'll be there just continuing my research and corroborating with those who are so like-minded as people such as myself and you two. I greatly appreciate your open-mindedness.
I Captain to that. It's been a real treat, and very, very informative, very insightful, and I thank you so much for bringing to bear your extensive knowledge about the Beatles and Paul being dead. Fred Pilate, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you having me. I would have liked to hear some callers, but fortunately some technical difficulties. But again, if you're looking to reach out to me with any further questions, you can find me on, just go to some message boards, and you can find my email there, and I'll know that you're serious. That sounds good. Cecil?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
As always, remember, if there's something that they aren't telling you, and you know who they are, give us a call. We'll corroborate it. We'll catch you next time on The National Conspirator.